Well, good morning or good afternoon to our audience. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our webinar today titled Consistency and Coordination of Energy Efficiency EM&V Reporting. This webinar will run for about 90 minutes, during which time we have 5 presentations covering multiple markets and strategies for addressing consistency and coordination of EM&V for efficiency. For you, the audience, all our phone lines are muted. If you do have questions, please type them into the text or chat box, and we'll do our best to get them answered. The webinar is also being recorded. The recording and slides will be available at the LBL webinar website, which is listed here and will be on other slides as well. We hope to get that up as early as today or even tomorrow. And let me mention that this funding for this webinar is from the Department of Energy's Office of Electricity Delivery and Energy Reliability, and that we're coordinating this series with input from DOE as well as the US EPA, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, and the National Association of State Energy Officials, who of course I want to thank for their support. I also want to mention our outreach sponsors to help us get the word out. That includes the International Energy Program Evaluation Conference, ACEEE, the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, and the regional energy efficiency offices, including the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership and the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. So let me just start off this webinar by introducing myself. I'm Steve Schuller, and I'm an affiliate and senior advisor in the Electricity Markets and Policy Group at LBL. I've worked in the industry, the energy industry, for many years, and have a great deal of that time been focused on efficiency and demand response and distributed generations. One of the areas of my focus is in evaluation, measurement, and verification, or EM&V, and I'm fortunate to be the facilitator of this webinar series. The Berkeley Lab, which is hosting these webinars, is supported by the U.S. Department of Energy to conduct non-classified research, and it's operated by the University of California. The lab, as we're known, also with funding from the Department of Energy, provides technical assistance to states, primarily state energy offices and utility regulatory commissions. And I also just want to mention our basic disclaimer here at the bottom, which you can read at your leisure at a later time. So I mentioned about the technical assistance, and LBL provides this independent and unbiased assistance for state utility regulatory commissions and state energy offices, tribes, and regional entities in a wide range of energy areas such as efficiency and demand response, renewables, and various grid topics. Contact information for the technical assistance is available via the websites listed here. And for those who don't write too fast, again, these slides will be available on the LBL EM&V webinar website. And if you don't have the site, if you just Google LBL EM&V webinars, it pops right up. So the webinar series, these webinars are designed to support activities for documenting energy savings and other impacts from efficiency programs. As mentioned before, it's funded by the US DOE with EPA, NARUC, and NASIO as our supporters, along as the other organizations that help with the outreach. And our target audience is utility commissions, the state energy offices, state environmental departments, and others involved in operating EE portfolios. But of course, we're happy to have all others, and we'll be having more webinars going forward. You know, on that, we are planning another one probably for later this, in February or in early March, and perhaps on demand response evaluation. So today's webinar. So efficiency programs have been in place in the states for several decades, and across our country, efficiency programs funded by utility customers, efficiency standards for appliances and equipment, and building energy codes seem likely to continue to offset the majority of the forecasted electric and perhaps even natural gas loads expected for growth in the country. So assessing these programs to determine the efficiency-related energy and non-related impacts is done via evaluation, measurement, and verification, or as we call it, EM&V. And how this EM&V is conducted, though, really varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction for all kinds of reasons, such as different objectives or different budgets or simply the nature of the different types of efficiency activities. However, some of these differences raise concerns about the variations in the rigor and the completeness of the indicated impacts, as well as inconsistency, does not necessarily allow for comparison between different jurisdictions or even between different programs within the same jurisdiction, within the same state. Thus, there are opportunities for improving the quality of EM&V through increasing the consistency and coordination, and such consistency and coordination can also facilitate benchmarking and disclosure activities, as well as just a simple tracking and reporting of efficiency impacts. It also can reduce the cost of EM&V development and implementation. And that's what we're going to talk about today during this webinar, in particular tools and processes that you can implement for utility programs, industrial projects, ESCO projects, and others for improving EM&V consistency and quality, as well as perhaps keeping the cost down, as they're being implemented by your colleagues around the country. So for the agenda, I'll be talking about a project with the Western Interstate Energy Board on coordinating EM&V activities and an example of a reporting tool. And then DOE's Mike Lee will talk about the EM&V Uniform Methods project. Following that, we'll have two speakers co-presenting, Molly Cripps from Tennessee and Rodney Sobin from NASIO on the National Energy Efficiency Registry. And that will be followed by LBL's Peter Silkelson talking about tools for around industrial project impacts. And embedding cleanup is Liz Stewart, also from LBL, who will talk about a reporting and tracking tool for projects done by energy service companies, or ESCOs. And then we should have some time for questions. Hopefully after each presentation, we'll be able to have a little bit of time for doing some clarification questions. Again, you can put those into the chat box. So with that, let me talk a little bit about this project with the Western Interstate Energy Board, also known as WEEB. This was funded by DOE to assess opportunities for coordinating EM&V across 11 western states. So some background, during 2015 and into 2016, we at LBL supported a project based on a request from WEEB to explore this multi-state demand-side management EM&V. And as part of that effort, we prepared a brief report, which is listed here on the slide and is available for download. And based on our research and talking with state and regional energy agency folks in the West, the report covered 3 potential approaches and several possible products for EM&V coordination among these 11 states and regional agencies in the region. And they're addressing efficiency and demand response and perhaps other distributed resources, as well as using efficiency for supporting pollution prevention. Subsequently, we've seen that there's interest in developing this coordination clearinghouse, which is one of the options that we identified, and that's now being explored by WEEB and LBL with input from the western states. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. First, before I do that, let me say a little bit about what I mean by coordination on EM&V. What we expect is that this coordination would involve effective interactions among the public agencies or other organizations concerning the documentation of the potential or actual impacts of efficiency and related actions. So the types of public agencies that might be involved in this are the state PUCs, or the energy offices and air regulators. We've chatted with a number of them across the region. It could also include local agencies such as city or regional governments that are really engaged in efficiency and demand-side resources, as well as regional organizations such as the independent system operators for the grid, or in the case of the West, there's the Northwest Power and Conservation Council's Regional Technical Forum known as RTF. Some examples of how these have been done are listed here. I won't necessarily go through these, but one is through C-Action, the federal effort, the DOE's Uniform Methods project in NEAR, which we're going to be talking about today. There's a why to this too, and I should come back to this, and I want to do that with this slide here about why we would find this important. I listed some of the reasons as the introduction to the webinar, but basically what we're looking to do is to improve the EM&V quality, support benchmarking and tracking within jurisdictions or between jurisdictions, and also to reduce the costs by sharing the resources and knowledge and experience. Of course, potential upsides usually come with some potential downsides, and I'd be perhaps misleading if I didn't mention some possible downsides to coordination, really depending on the level of effort that's put into that. possibly some loss of control if individual jurisdictions are working with others. There's always a chance of some lowest common denominator, type efforts or products coming out of this, products or services do not meet your individual needs, but meet the needs of others. And then if the coordination and effort is inefficient, there could be increased costs and delays if it's really not going well. So the options that we identified with this report, again, it's available for download, is a information clearinghouse and exchange, which, as a hint, as I think I mentioned before, is what we're following up with with the Western region. And this would be a relatively low level of coordination involving sharing of existing EM&V documents, procedural approaches, exchanging information experience, and really about opening up communication lines among the people and the public agencies and the related organizations that are working on efficiency and demand response, and really all grid edge type strategies and programs in the region, and have the opportunity for them to talk and coordinate among themselves to the degree they're interested. The next option that we identified was EM&V product development. This would be mutual, voluntary development of specific EM&V products. And then the last would be establishing a Western region tracking system. And the platforms like that, like NEAR, are going to be discussed in later presentations. So as I mentioned, the Clearinghouse is the one that we're pursuing here. And this was presented actually in another webinar, which you can also access online, so it gets into much more detail about that as well as the reports. We're expecting the benefits mentioned before, but the possible downsides I mentioned, such as cost or loss of control, are really not expected with the Clearinghouse option. And so we feel that it's a good starting point that could lead to other efforts among the 11 states or just groups of states that want to pursue specific topics or products. So some options for moving forward with this and types of topics that we could possibly cover or information that can be shared is shown in the left column here. And it's really open to the participating states and regional groups to indicate what they want help with. But some of the items discussed today are here, such as something as simple as a consistent glossary of terms to developing framework documents for EM&V and EM&V protocols that are consistent across the region. And then in the right column, I mentioned some options for how the Clearinghouse can be formatted, such as website or listservs or webinars. And right now we're looking at regular conference calls or webinars and perhaps an electronic newsletter, as well as one-on-one technical support that can be provided through LBL by LBL using the support we have from the US Department of Energy for doing that type of technical support. So with that, with some more information we have available, again, there's the report, the prior webinars, and then here's some contacts for myself and Lisa Schwartz, also at LBL, as well as Elaine at WEEB, you can contact if you're interested in following up on this. So with that, I want to turn to one example for an opportunity for increasing consistency. And this is for coming up with a standardized reporting format for utility customer-funded programs run by either investor-owned utilities or public utilities or independent administrators. And this is something that LBL has developed. And the reason we felt it was important to work on this is that the efficiency reporting we're finding is becoming increasingly important. These customer-funded programs are spending on the order of $7 billion, probably more at this point. And as a result, there's an increasing need for regulators and administrators and other stakeholders to have good insight into how these funds are being spent. And currently, these reports include a narrative and table and charts with spending and averages. But in our research, when we reviewed pretty much all the annual reports from across the states, we found issues in those practices. Issues that create challenges when comparing the results, and inconsistency in the rigor, and in some cases incomplete reports. So this makes it a challenge, for really knowing whether the administrators are achieving their goals. So with that in mind, we also found that the way people categorize and describe different programs is it really varies. And I realize this slide is fairly small, but it just gives you an idea that when we were going through that, we came up with 27 categories of efficiency programs and 65 specific program types. And as you can imagine, different entities describe these differently. And so, being able to compare between programs when there's not even a consistent definition of them becomes really difficult, which is where the reporting tool and templates that we developed come in. So the objectives, again, for this was to encourage more transparency and consistency and rigor in the efficiency reporting, and to really provide some templates for looking at impacts and costs, levels of participation, and the methodologies that were used to arrive at those values for reporting what was done. It doesn't specify what has to be done, it just says try to be clear and transparent about that. And we came up with these with the idea of these states that don't currently provide annual reports, or states that are new to energy efficiency program or perhaps ramping up their programs. And our aim is also to encourage broader, more comprehensive data being available to the states and all the participants. And again, sort of mentioning, what you would use this for, it's for benchmarking, and it's for, regulators to be able to compare cost and performance. Also, to ensure, of course, prudent spending of ratepayer dollars, and using that information also for forecasting, for the system operators to have a better feel for what they can count on from the efficiency resource. So there's a lot of uses for this, and what we've come up with are two reporting tools. This first one here is for private utilities or investor-owned utilities. They're online, they're free, they're open for anyone's use. I'm not necessarily going to go through these because I want to give us to our other speakers, but all this information and guidance is online, as I mentioned before. So there's one here for the IOUs, and then there was one developed with APPA for small or just public power program administrators as well. And then, as promised, here's some links and information that you can find on these reporting tools, as well as the contact. Ian Hoffman is project manager for this effort here at LBL. So with that, that concludes my presentations, and I want to now turn it over to our other topics and speakers. And here they are listed. I'll do introductions as each person starts off. So with that, I'm going to now actually turn it over to Mike Lee. Mike is a Senior Policy Advisor in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at the Department of Energy. His focus is on supporting states with resources and technical assistance to help them with achieving their energy efficiency goals. And one of those areas is, as you can imagine, evaluation, measurement, and verification. And in EM&V, he directs the Uniform Methods Project, which he's going to talk about, and is a lead for the C-Action EM&V Working Group. Prior to working and joining at DOE, Mike worked at various state agencies in Maryland and was actually the Chief of Staff for the Maryland Energy Administration under several administrations. So with that, I'm going to stop and let Mike take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So today I'm going to talk about our Uniform Methods project, but as Steve mentioned, we do have another thing where we work on EM&V issues called C-Action. And I'm just going to highlight a couple things in C-Action that I think are relevant to this call, especially since I see some of our sort of partners on the webinar here. And so one of those things has been something that we've been working on with Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, which is our Model EM&V Methods Standardized Reporting Forms project. So if you're interested in sort of that topic, I encourage you to look at the NEEP website. And then another thing that I wanted to highlight, which we're not involved in, but I think is relevant to this webinar and we're not going to get a chance to cover, is from the CPUC and their Impact Evaluation Standard Reporting Guidelines. And I see Rob Caston from Pacific Gas and Electric is on here as well. So let me just highlight those two things for you, and now I'll get going on our Uniform Methods project. So I'm going to go over these slides pretty quickly, and hopefully I cover the basics, and then you can sort of ask more detailed questions as we go along at the end of all the presentation. Sorry. So the goal of the Uniform Methods Project is to strengthen the credibility of energy efficiency programs by improving the consistency and transparency of how energy savings are determined. UMP is a set of protocols for determining savings from the most common energy efficiency measures and programs. And the goal of UMP is to document the generally accepted best practice methods for determining savings for each protocol. And so I'll get into a little bit more about what some of those things mean a little bit later. So just a few key highlights about the UMP protocols is that they're based on IPMVP in most cases. They focus on gross savings primarily, although there is some discussion of net savings, and for some measures or programs it does address net savings. And the key distinction is that UMP is really focused around energy efficiency programs and not projects, although as one can imagine that distinction is blurred a little bit in some cases. And then for those of you that are particularly interested in the ESCO performance contracting type world, DOE has developed something through our Federal Energy Management Program, which we call FEMP, and it's the FEMP M&V guidelines, and we're actually on version 4 of that. And that is also based on IPMVP, and it provides a little bit more specificity than what IPMVP goes into. This is what each measure protocol contains, and so we make a distinction between measure protocols and cross-cutting protocols. And so measure protocols are something like lighting, whereas a cross-cutting protocol would be something like metering. And so that metering protocol would apply to a bunch of different measures, and so that's why it's referred to as cross-cutting. And you'll see a list of those a little bit later. So for the measure protocols, you see it includes a description of the measure and the application conditions, right? And so we try and narrow it down into what we're really talking about in this protocol or in the chapter. And then you'll see an algorithm for estimating savings. You'll see a description of the typical program offering, and then some considerations for the M&V process, some data collection requirements, and then some recommended program evaluation elements. And so that's all spelled out a little bit more if you sort of go to the website and take a look at each individual protocol. So on this slide, you'll see a list of the different measures for the commercial sector that we've published here. I'm not going to read them all, but there's chiller, there's commercial new construction, there's retro commissioning, and so you can refer to the list later if you want to see the full list. But while we're on this set of slides, I'll just say that the goal for choosing the measures was to come up with the measures that were most commonly found in program administrator portfolios. And so our real goal is to sort of identify the measures that contribute roughly somewhere in the order of 70 to 80% of the total savings from a program. And so when we did the research, we quickly found that you don't really need to develop protocols for that many measures in order to cover the vast majority of savings that are being delivered in portfolios. So here you'll see sort of the list of the residential measures. So for those of you that aren't looking at the slides online, there's residential furnaces and boilers, residential lighting, residential behavior, refrigerator recycling, and then a couple other ones that apply to both small commercial and residential sectors. And then this slide shows the cross-cutting protocols. So these are the protocols that sort of could apply to a number of different measures. So you see metering, there's peak demand, there's sample design, and a few other ones, including net savings. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the next few slides and just talk to you a little bit about the process about this. And so we wanted the Uniform Methods Project protocols to be sort of something that was collaborative, that had the buy-in from a lot of different stakeholders, including a lot of different evaluators. And so each chapter is written by a technical expert, or usually a team of technical experts that has been identified by their peers as the experts for doing M&V for that measure. And so we solicit sort of input from different stakeholders about who the expert is, and then we sort of approach them about sort of being the lead author. And so their goal is not, as the lead author, is not to write down what they think is the generally accepted best practice in their opinion, but really to work with the other leaders for M&V for that measure and figure out, like, as a group, what is the collective that we think is the best practice here. And so they work with their peers, and then it gets reviewed by something that we call a technical advisory group, which is for the most part the heads of the major evaluation firms that do a lot of the work in the US. And then we do a public comment period, and so where people, anybody can sort of comment on the protocol that was written. And so the protocol development process, because it is very collaborative and we do take a lot of input, takes a very long time. So start to finish, most of the protocols will take a year to develop. But we hope that, you know, we're investing that amount of time because we want the users of it to know that it's something that has been vetted by multiple experts and that you know, has the buy-in of a variety of different evaluators that are doing the evaluations for these measures. So this slide here sort of gives you the breakdown of all the individual steps in the process. For those of you that are looking at the slide, the TAG review is the technical advisory group, and that's the, some of the heads of the major evaluation firms. And then the steering committee review is, SC stands for steering committee, and that is a group of stakeholders, and that group is usually 20 to 30 people who are sort of involved in a high level in UMP, and one of the main things that they do is determine which measure or program needs a protocol because it's generating a lot of savings for portfolios. So if you're interested, you know, general stakeholders are welcome to join that stakeholder steering committee, so just be in touch with me. Yeah, so you'll just see here there's a couple more statistics or a couple more details about sort of who's been involved. As you can see, we really tried to involve a lot of the evaluation firms here, and so CADMIS is the principal consultant, but you know, we stress to them that they are not, shouldn't be viewed as sort of like the sort of creator of the Uniform Methods Project. They really are just managing a lot of the other evaluation firms that are participating while at the same time lending their expertise. And so you can see there's a long list here from a lot of the players that you already know, like Navigant, Nexent, DNVGL, ITRON. I won't read through them all. Here's another list. You'll just see that it's a long list of contributors to the protocols, and in each chapter, within the first couple pages, you can see who the contributors were to each of the individual protocols. So the next few slides are just going to talk about where the UMP is used. And so one of the major places that the UMP is used is obviously to sort of guide M&V studies. And so I have a list here of some of the ones that we've been able to find. And if there's other people out there that have places where you've used UMP for an M&V study, feel free to let us know. We're always looking to catalog that. So another one of the places where we see UMP used a lot is in RFPs. So where an RFP is asking for or giving guidance to the people responding about how they expect their M&V study to be done. And then another place where we see the use is in technical reference manuals. You'll see there Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Iowa use or refer to UMP in some way. And I think that's really about it for UMP, and there's my contact information if you want to see more of the details about it, or you know, if this was too quick and you want a little bit more information, I'd be happy to set up a call with you separately. So I think that's it for me, Steve.
Great. Thanks, Mike, for going through that so essentially very efficiently. Again, I want to mention to folks, if you do have questions for Mike or me, Steve Schiller, or others, welcome to use the chat box, and we will try to do that for clarifying. I think right now, we'll be moving on to our next presentation. And again, if people come back with questions for Mike or others, we can try to respond to those. For our next presentation, then, we're very fortunate that we've got two folks who are going to be talking about the National Energy Efficiency Registry. First is Molly Cripps. She's a Director of Office of Energy Programs in the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, where she oversees efforts and activities under the DOE funded state energy program and various other special projects. She also serves as the principal investigator on a 2015 competitive award to Tennessee for this effort that here her and Rodney are going to be describing. Prior to being at the Office of Energy Programs, where she started in 2010, she spent several years practicing law in Tennessee, focusing on compliance and municipal liability defense. She has a BA in History and Political Science from the University of Tennessee and a law degree from Vanderbilt University Law School. And then following her co-presenting will be Rodney Sobin. Rodney is a Senior Program Director at the National Association of State Energy Officials, one of our co-sponsors for this, so it's great to have you presenting that and NASIO's participation. Thanks, Rodney, for that again. He works on a number of energy topics at NASIO, including efficiency as an emissions reduction approach. Prior to NASIO, he was the Director of Research and Regulatory Affairs at the Alliance to Save Energy, and his prior experience includes energy environmental work at the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. He has 2 master's degrees from Washington University in St. Louis and a bachelor's from Cornell. And so Molly and Rod, let you take it from here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Steve. This is Molly Cripps with PDEC's Office of Energy Programs. I appreciate you all joining us this afternoon to learn about the National Energy Efficiency Registry project. And since we have a number of slides that we would like to get through, I will cover a few and then turn it over to Rodney, and then he'll turn it back over to me. The NER is a central repository that will allow the public and private sectors to transparently track attributes associated with energy efficiency initiatives, as well as to help demonstrate progress toward energy efficiency goals and potential compliance with existing and future state and federal environmental regulations. The NER will also be able to track energy conservation and other types of reduction efforts. Not only will the NER help states achieve emissions reductions cost effectively, but it will also support the public and private sectors in their efforts to utilize cost-effective energy efficiency investments as a means to improve economic competitiveness and environmental quality. The NER itself will not impose any policy or prohibit the use of any reporting, QA/QC, or EM&V protocol. Rather, its objective is to consistently and transparently disclose how energy efficiency projects are implemented, measured, and verified so that compliance programs or market actors have access to the information they need to demonstrate project eligibility or facilitate trading of generated instruments. The NER will support the registration of both ratepayer and non-ratepayer programs such as ESCO delivered efficiency and building energy codes, so that all energy efficiency initiatives can be tracked together in a single standardized system. The NER will also support the development of financial instruments representing verified energy savings. The ownership and external transactions of these instruments will be tracked in the NER, allowing for the NER to support the demonstration of compliance with energy and environmental regulations. And I will leave this up for just a few seconds here, but this is a slide to demonstrate potential NER applications for both electric EE and fossil fuel energy efficiency. The objectives of the NER are to provide a consistent framework that will allow for energy efficiency to be used to achieve energy and environmental objectives, demonstrate eligibility and verification of energy efficiency projects, particularly voluntary private sector efficiency actions according to eligibility standards proposed by states, and to facilitate the opportunity for energy efficiency instrument trading. And now I will turn it over to Rod.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you, Steve, as well. And there we go. and also to the other organizers of the series. This has been a real valuable EM&V webinar series, so thank you for that. I wanted to take just a couple of moments to go over the major steps that we envision NEAR to have, or many of these are sort of generic for registries in general. The first step is that the jurisdiction, typically, let's say a state, would be the one that defines the program requirements. The SCCP is just a little bit of lingo, meaning specific compliance and certification program requirements. So that could be a state's program, that could be a regional program, it could even be a voluntary program. Again, NEAR will not define the EM&V requirements and other sorts of criteria, but will generally reflect what a given jurisdiction needs for its programs. That said, we do envision some opportunities for sort of default requirements. The NEAR basic would be less rigorous for sort of voluntary and sort of self-disclosure, whereas the NEAR enhanced had been envisioned to be based on the Clean Power Plan's model trading rules. That is a bit moot these days, but that is an option for states or jurisdictions that don't have existing requirements. Then the EE provider would create an account with NEAR. The EE provider would then also register a given asset, an asset being a project or a portfolio of projects, say a bunch of performance contracts, for example. The client jurisdiction or delegated to NEAR would certify the eligibility of the asset or the project. Does it fit within the program? And then the EE provider would register the asset output, which is a fancy term for the megawatt hours or therms or whatever the unit of outputs are. And that's where the NEAR would provide a platform for recording that output and recording the M&V and other documentation for it. The jurisdiction, or if delegated NEAR, would accept those assets, and then it would create the instruments. These could be energy efficiency certificates or allowances of some sort, depending on the nature of the program. And then NEAR can serve as a tracking and trading vehicle or platform where that is indicated. Just a couple of very quick charts. I'm not going to go in detail, but a little bit of a cartoon of the process if one were reporting an asset. Typically the regulator, whether it's the air regulator or energy office or PUC, would create the forms and the requirements. The applicant would gather the data, fill it out, and then the regulator makes the determination. We've made a little bit of an analogy to, say, tax software or accounting software, where the regulator, the analogy being taxes in this case being IRS, creates the forms and the criteria. The taxpayer would gather the data, fill it in, and there'd be an automated platform, the software, and we envision NEAR as being that software. The CPA little symbol there would be the equivalent in the EM&V world of having a third-party verifier. So you can envision certain programs, as was suggested for the Clean Power Plan, but it could be for other sorts of programs where third-party verification may be a requirement. The NEAR platform would then record who that verifier is, that they in fact are qualified according to the criteria of the state, and provide the transparency not only for the M&V, but also that the third-party verification had occurred. So we believe that there is some potential for a registry process in NEAR to lower energy efficiency program and policy administrative costs by helping streamline and make more consistent the processes, by automating some of the processes. Again, NEAR we view as essentially a software platform. We hope that it would also help streamline EM&V through consistency where that's possible. And we think that the NEAR could support state energy and environmental planning efforts, adding credibility to the energy savings that are achieved through projects. And I forgot to mention that A lot of the emphasis is on non-ratepayer programs. We envision NEAR supporting both ratepayer and non-ratepayer, but often the ratepayer programs are already covered under PUC supervision. But it's less documentation of things like performance contracting or building codes and so forth. NEAR would also would avoid double counting of energy savings and provide transparency of programs and program impacts. This is a little bit redundant, but we think that NEAR can improve the credibility and transparency of the energy savings and their associated benefits, which could be reliability benefits or avoided emissions, and that this would result in better recognition of energy efficiency as cost-effective and efficacious, and often the lowest cost energy resource available. We hope this may be useful, for example, for air regulators when they're considering things like nitrogen oxides and state implementation plans. And we hope this would also incite more investment in EE. And in this tag team, I will hand it back to Molly.
All right, thank you very much, Rod. And through. Bear with us for just a few more minutes. I wanted to cover a few more slides with you. The NEAR project team is comprised of several states. We have Michigan, Minnesota, Tennessee, Georgia, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. And joining us on our main project team is also the National Association of State Energy Officials and the Climate Registry. E for the Future and APX are also providing much assistance as well. In Tennessee and the other states and project partners have been working to develop principles and operating rules that describe the design and functionality of the NEAR, and drafting state adoption and implementation roadmaps is another item that we will be working on in the future. And those will provide states guidance on how to use the NEAR to meet energy and environmental program objectives. And we'll also be working on identifying key functional software components. Here we go, sorry. As I mentioned, TCR and NASIO are also project partners, and they have done a lot of the work with regard to the principles and operating rules that we have pulled together. We are currently working on finalizing those within our project team working groups, and also in conjunction with our steering advisory committee and a multi-stakeholder working group. And the multi-stakeholder working group will be taking one more look at those, and then we will have those ready to push out for public comment. So stay tuned, and we will have information up on the TCR website within the next couple of weeks when that comment period opens. And a bit of information about the folks that are assisting us on the stakeholder working group and in the steering advisory committee. We have participants from state government, nonprofit and advocacy groups, utility and energy groups, everything from ESCOs to electric utilities, academia and research, consulting firms, federal government, industry, and local government. So noted there are other states that are participating in the working group, and so we have an additional 14 states beyond those that are on the project team. And so this slide represents both the project team states and the additional states that are engaged in our stakeholder working group. So how can you get involved? I hope we have piqued the interest of everyone who is on the line. And if you aren't already involved in the project or have not had the opportunity to participate in any of our stakeholder meetings or webinars to date, please reach out to Ryan Cassett with TCR. His email address is at the bottom of this slide. And we certainly would like your assistance in helping us design our user scenarios that are relevant to your state programs, and also to provide the feedback on our draft principles and operating rules. And that comment period will be open between April and May of 2017. Thanks very much, everyone. We appreciate you joining us on the webinar today.
Well, Molly and Rod, thank you very much for that presentation and going through that there. I do. I do have two clarifying questions, really sort of a technical nature I might want to take a shot at. One is around double counting. How do you plan on addressing double counting across projects and programs? And the other really gets into the M&V, and I think you addressed that in that you're not going to have M&V requirements, but I was wondering if one of you might be able to talk a little bit about net versus gross and what information would go into the registry.
Let me give a shot at that, and let me answer the double counting one first. So the idea really is documentation. So the idea is that the applicant would have to register a project and then would register the output of that project, which are, say if for simplicity we're just talking about megawatt hours of electricity savings, that project owners, whether it's an ESCO or a building owner, would need to provide the appropriate documentation in accordance with whatever the underlying program is, whether it's a state or something else. And it would provide the address of the project, some parameters for the project, and each megawatt hour would receive some sort of serial number so that you could not trade the same megawatt hours doubly. So the point is that an ESCO wouldn't come in and say a utility that offered a rebate for a chiller in that project shouldn't be able to come in and make the same claims. Now it's up to the ESCO and the building owner and the utility on a contractual basis to divvy up, who gets what. But when they come to the near, it has to be pretty clean. So I wouldn't say we do title searches, but there'd be some documentation of who makes a valid claim. As to the net to gross, I think we're policy neutral. It is based on the program, so I don't really have much to say about it. It isn't that NEAR would do net to gross ratios. That would have to be provided exogenously by the program. At least that's my thinking at this point.
Okay. Good. I don't know if Molly, if anything else to add on it. One of the other things too that came up was, would you see the NEAR is being similar to renewable energy credit registries that exist in the country? Is there analogies to that?
Molly, you want me to try?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, so, and in fact, a fair amount of our homework in this project has been looking at the renewable energy registries and the rec market to learn lessons thereof, and also to see that this sort of effort isn't really, being replicated elsewhere. A number of the existing renewable energy registries do have some aspect of energy efficiency that's included on a limited basis, and not to the level that we're considering. But we do see analogies with that. But as I think we all know in the EM&V business, the EE side and the EM&V for it is quite a bit more complicated than on the supply side, where you have output on, that's metered.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you again to both of you for the presentation. And I think at this time we'll be moving on to our next presentation, where we have Dr. Peter Thirkelson. Peter is a research scientist in the energy technologies area at LBL. His work focuses on industrial energy performance and management, as well as development and deployment of efficiency and generation technologies. In his role there, he also serves as a delegate of the United States at International Standards Organization meetings, ISO, for energy management and savings. And he also conducts data-driven analysis of energy management systems with a focus on the cost and benefits of certification in the Department of Energy's Superior Energy Performance Program, which is focused on industrial projects, which is what Peter's going to talk about. So we're going to turn a little bit to talk about another area in energy efficiency world, this time on industrial, and talk a little bit about opportunities for standardization, consistency, coordination. So with that, Peter, please take it from there.
great. Thank you, Steve, and good afternoon and good morning to all on the phone call. Thank you in advance for taking the time to tune into a topic that's near and dear to me, and that is industrial energy efficiency, and then secondarily the energy management systems and consistent EM&V approaches around energy management and whole facility approaches to energy savings that are being developed, being used, and being harmonized now across the United States from a utility, from a national, and also from an international perspective. I'll briefly be going over the kind of large categories of opportunities for energy efficiency in industry and the common approaches to achieving those energy savings that are taken today, which then leads to a discussion very briefly about energy management systems and strategic energy management, both facility-wide approaches to achieving deeper and more continual improvement of energy performance in industry, as well as commercial buildings and other sectors. Discuss facility-wide EM&V and the standards and harmonization of facility-wide EM&V that surround this topic, and then briefly give an update on a new US DOE program, 50001 Ready, which aims to bring the emphasis of energy management systems, facility-wide EM&V, to the masses in a very accessible way, in such that utilities can also make easy use of DOE resources and tools for their own benefit. When you step back and look at a manufacturer at large, typically what you see when you look inside that facility boundaries, you'll see things, equipment, processes, and systems that are supported together. And commonly, the attention of energy efficiency is placed on these tangible objects. However, there are other operational control, retrocommissioning, behavior, and maintenance activities that dramatically impact the energy performance of the facility and ensure that energy efficiency as put in through technology are maintained and continually achieved. Commonly what this results in is most energy efficiency programs focusing at a project level. They're looking at those equipment, systems, and processes. For very simple systems, you may have a deemed approach, and for very complex systems, you may have a custom approach to energy savings programs. Custom approaches are very common in industry, as usually no two facilities that are even producing the same product will look alike, and over time, their processes, systems, and equipment have become very unique. Again, backing up though, if you were to look at the facility at a boundary level, you've now are looking to try to incorporate the behavior, maintenance, operational control, and retrocommissioning components of energy efficiency within that facility. This leads us to the slide with the long title, and that is looking at what energy management systems are and what SEM, strategic energy management, is. An energy management system is not a black box on a wall. It is not a glorified thermostat. It is not a control program or system. It is a business practice, much in the way that is used to manage labor and raw materials, that is put in place to continually improve energy performance facility-wide. EMSs, as they're commonly known, are sector agnostic, but for the most part have been put in place in industry. We are seeing increased adoption in the commercial building sector, though. ISO 50001 is an international energy management system standard that has requirements for a best practice energy management system. This is a standard that you can achieve certification to, and there are over 10,000 certifications worldwide now. At the state level, there are a growing number of utility and other programs aimed at improving energy performance facility-wide by gaining and achieving savings through those non-technical components. At utility-based programs, these are commonly referred to as strategic energy management, or SEM programs. I've listed a number of utilities, a very short list, and highlighted a few that have had a long-standing history of engagement in SEM programs. There are an ever-growing number of utilities and states that are engaging in SEM. For example, California is in the process of developing a strategic energy management program for the state as well. When measuring and verifying savings and evaluating savings for SEM programs, the programs will take a facility-wide approach. Instead of looking at individual projects, they'll look at the facility as a whole. This will then be the comparison of a baseline to a reporting period. In recognizing that there are effects on energy consumption between the two periods from things that are either in or not in control of the facility, such as changes in production or weather. These relevant variables and their effect on energy consumption have a confounding impact on understanding what energy savings have been achieved by the facility between the baseline and reporting period. Without correcting for these relevant variables, you'll end up with an apples to oranges comparison and without being able to clearly identify energy savings. By creating what are called adjustment models for energy consumptions, you can normalize energy consumption to make two comparable periods and are able to understand the energy savings that are achieved. What this looks like at the simplest level is the collection of data in the baseline period, the formulation of an equation that relates energy consumption to variables such as production and weather, the use of that new model to create a how much energy would I have consumed if I behaved as I did in the baseline period number, and using that newly calculated value, you're able to compare to actual energy consumption in the reporting period. Here you'll see the actual energy consumption in the reported period is less than the modeled baseline period energy consumption, showing an improvement in energy performance. Energy savings have been achieved. There are a large number of utility and national and international protocols of varying between guidance and requirements to calculate energy savings from a facility-wide SEM/ENMS approach. Some of the large ones include Energy Trust of Oregon's Energy Intensity Modeling Guideline, Bonneville's Energy Smart Industrial MTNR Guidelines, and of course International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol Option C, as well as two DOE protocols with requirements, the first being the published Superior Energy Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol, as well as the near-published Qualified Energy Savings Measurement and Verification Protocol, which is a subset of the SEP EM&V protocol. There are both international and national efforts being conducted to coordinate on EM&V to make sure that there is consistency and harmony in the approaches to facility-wide measurement and verification. At the international standards level, two published standards, ISO 50015 and ISO 50047, in coordination describe the process of conducting facility-wide EM&V, as well as the approach to calculating through regression modeling energy savings for the facility. Domestically, Mike Lee's program, the UMP project, is near completion of a SEM evaluation protocol that builds on the best practices and history from the utility-based programs across the United States. Also, DOE is in its final stages of developing a requirements document, the Qualified Energy Savings Protocol, which will be released early this year and builds upon the best practices of ISO EM&V, as well as what has been learned from other US DOE Energy Management System programs, the Superior Energy Performance Program. When you take a step back and look at these ISO standards, ISO 50015 and 47, as well as the standards that are released across the country, you're able to identify some key common principles that are needed to achieve facility-wide EM&V. I've highlighted just a few of these in red, the kind of the more important ones of them pertaining to this talk: the identification of boundaries, identification of time periods, that baseline and reporting period, energy consumption data, relevant variable data, the development of energy consumption models, and then the calculation of energy savings itself. The identification of these key principles is important such that new and existing protocols can harmonize together such that there's coordination on this topic and savings that are reported within one territory can be understood by another. Lastly, an update on a new DOE program, 50001 Ready, which is a self-directed SEM-type program designed to be adapted by utilities. This is a new program that builds upon the Energy Management System principles of ISO 50001, and it is founded on two tools. First, the 50001 Navigator is a self-directed tool for implementing an energy management system. This allows facilities to have a TurboTax approach to this business practice implementation, as well as their support for measurement and verification at the facility-wide level, both through the Qualified Energy Savings Protocol I've referenced and an online regression model tool, the Qualified Energy Savings Tool, or QUEST. Additionally, there are reference programs designs being built, such that a utility can look at these two tools or the DOE program that will be launched and make use of them as appropriate for their context and jurisdiction and regulation. With that, I'd like to say thank you for your time, and I'm very excited about this topic, and feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email, and I'm willing to discuss at any time. Thank you.
Well, great, Peter. Thanks for going through that. Did have one interesting question that came up, and I might be putting you a bit on the spot. You maybe talk a little bit about now, or maybe when we have discussion at the end there is, are there examples of industry, taking up some of these protocols and what some of their lessons learned have been from that, or some, good case studies available? I don't know if that's something maybe you want to have available at the tip of your tongue there.
Sure. Yes, there are many examples and many case studies, and both at the utility, national, and international level. At the utility level, I'll reference again Energy Trust of Oregon and Bonneville, who have been conducting SEM for a long time now, have gone through program evaluations and have results to share thereof of their experience using facility-wide EM&V. Additionally, from our national work and international work with countries around that are implementing ISO 50001 type programs, there is a large number of case studies online that describe not only the process of implementing the energy management system, but then conducting facility-wide EM&V and the successes and challenges thereof. A few quick reference sources for such case studies that people can use as Google terms to get to them would be the SEP website. That's SEP. If you Google SEP DOE EM&V, you'll click to a website that has a bunch of case studies focusing on implementation of that program nationally and the results thereof. They're also from the Clean Energy Ministerial, which is an international collaboration of energy ministers. There's the Energy Management Working Group, and they have almost 50 case studies of implementation of ISO 50001 and the EM&V associated with that. Additionally, there are many resources and experts that are now being accredited to facility-wide EM&V that can be called upon.
Oh, great. That was great. Thanks, Peter. You mentioned utilities. Is there a list somewhere of which utilities are using 50001?
We'll back up and go to the larger construct of strategic energy management, which may or may not be based upon ISO 50001 itself, but typically has a basis of energy management systems. CEE has done ongoing studies of what utilities have ongoing SEM programs, and there's recently a report from them identifying, I believe, over 100 and so odd utilities that have such programs. Again, I will point to kind of the heavy hitters and historical heavy hitters of Bonneville and Energy Trust and BC Hydro, have wonderful documentation and have been for a long time very keen to share their successes and experiences in this topic area. There are a small but growing number of programs that are fully based upon the ISO 50001 international standard. One challenge is that ISO is an audit document, so that an auditor can walk into a facility and say yes or no, you are conformant with this. And for companies that are just getting started with energy management, that can be a very heavy lift to go from 0 to 100 in a very short order. So one area that utilities are very successful is having a building approach where through multiple years they will build facilities energy management systems in partnership to go from 0 to the ISO level.
Great. And you had mentioned, I know Mike's still available there, but talking about the Uniform Methods Project, I think both of you mentioned that looking at doing something related under the UMP. I don't know if either Mike or you, Mike, are still there to want to say anything about that and how it relates to these.
So I think this is in reference to the Strategic Energy Management Protocol and UMP. Is that along the lines of what you're thinking about, Steve?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, we sort of worked, the two teams worked together to make sure that they were sort of consistent with one another and that we were able to distinguish the difference between, SEP and ISO 50001 and the UMP SEM protocol. So It took a long time, but I think we're all sort of pretty aligned on that, and the Strategic Energy Management Protocol should come out in the next month or two.
Mike's absolutely right that there was a lot of effort being put in place to ensure harmonization, consistency across not only US DOE facility-wide EM&V protocols, state-level and utility-level EM&V protocols, but even examining those new international guidance standards around that put together form the facility-wide EM&V approach. This is an area that is consolidating now. This is an area of growing interest for more and more regulators and utilities, and the UMP document is very timely in providing that output of current best practices from this topic.
Okay. Well, great. Again, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Mike, for filling in on that. So I think now we'll turn to our last but not least presentation, which is going to be provided by Liz Stewart. Liz, our colleague here at LBL, is a program manager in the Electricity Markets and Policy Group. She's led or co-authored more than a dozen LBL reports and policy papers, and her research and technical assistance work covers a range of efficiency and demand response policy and program issues, including utility and public sector energy efficiency programs, as particularly energy service programs, and the ESCO industry. Liz has her MBA in Sustainable Management from Presidio Graduate School in San Francisco. So with that, Liz, if you can take it away.
Great. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, everyone. Great presentations. So I'll be talking about two related initiatives. One will be a little bit on the historic Lawrence Berkeley Lab ESCO database and analysis initiative, which produces periodic research papers. And then I'll also talk about the eProject Builder ESPC data management tool, which relates pretty directly to the M&V topics that have been discussed. So first I'll just kind of give an overview for those who may not know of what the ESCO business model is, what these companies do. So energy service companies, or as LBNL defines ESCOs, as organizations that provide performance contracting. So they provide a range of energy efficiency, engineering, construction services, but a key business offering is that they do provide what are called energy savings performance contracts, or ESPC, as a core offering. And so what ESPC is and does is it's a tool for financing energy efficiency projects, and the customer finances it. And this enables the customer to do these often very large projects with little or no upfront capital. And then the ESCO then provides a guarantee. There's a contract for the loan, and there's a contract with the ESCO. The ESCO provides a guarantee that the savings will be sufficient to cover the customer's payments, for the implementation and the interest. And so this is an incredible enabler of energy efficiency. And of course, key to a performance guarantee is, understanding how, are those savings materializing. So the heart of ESPC is a guaranteed, a specified level of cost savings and performance. And a primary purpose of measurement and verification, in the ESCO world, we don't talk about EM&V so much as we just talk about M&V, because we're not necessarily evaluating a program like a utility customer program, but we're talking about the measurement and verification of a particular project. And so the primary purpose of M&V, or a primary purpose, is to reduce the risk of non-performance of the project to an acceptable level. And so in order to understand project performance, it must undergo annual measurement and verification of the installed measures. And we've already heard about a couple of the guides and best practices that relate to M&V for ESPC. We heard a little bit about the IPMVP, International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol. Haven't heard much about ASHRAE Guideline 14. I'll say something brief about that. We did hear from Mike about the Uniform Methods Project, which was great, and then the M&V guidance, which is based on IPMVP but goes a bit further. So a little about each of these. IPMVP was actually established quite a while ago but it's undergone several revisions and updates. I think it was originally established by DOE, and now it is not under an organization called the Efficiency Evaluation Organization. And it provides a conceptual framework for measuring or calculating and reporting the results of the M&V, the annual M&V. And it also defines key terms. It highlights issues to consider and provides for 4 key M&V options. Option A isolates the retrofit measure and measures one key parameter. So for example, option A is used a lot for lighting retrofits, where perhaps the power drawn is measured and then the hours of operation for that new equipment can be estimated, and from that you can estimate what the savings will be. Option B also isolates the retrofit, but it measures all parameters of the installed equipment or measure. And again, lighting might be a good application for this when the measurement includes the power usage and you actually measure the real hours of operation. Option C is a whole facility approach, and the savings estimate are determined by measuring energy use at the whole building or maybe the sub-facility level, and it often involves analysis of utility bills and regression analysis to account for independent variables such as outdoor air temperatures. And then option D is a calibrated simulation that models energy performance measured in the facility. So each of these options provides a different sort of level of complexity, and each is appropriate for different kinds of measures. So in any comprehensive retrofit, you might be using multiple options. Briefly, ASHRAE Guideline 14. ASHRAE is the acronym for American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. This guideline specifies 3 engineering approaches to M&V.
Hi, Liz. This is Steve. So I'm just going to interrupt real quick.
Sure.
We didn't advance the slides quite yet, so I just want to note people that I think we're right here for the next
there we go. Sorry, I
Yeah.
forgot to advance the slides.
Yeah, my apologies to the audience. Thanks for...
No, my apologies too.
All right.
So I just spoke about IPMVP and those 4 options, and the ASHRAE guideline provides engineering approaches that are sort of parallel to IPMVP options B, C, and D, which involve engineering, or can involve engineering, but not option A. And then the Uniform Methods Project we heard Mike Lee talk about earlier. And then the Federal Energy Management Program, or FEMP, has been updating its M&V guidance and recently released the version 4.0. And FEMP, just to get a little background for those who might know, FEMP supports federal agency efforts to meet agency level and federal energy-related goals, and also provide energy leadership to the country. So FEMP runs an ESPC program that provides procedures and documents for performance contracting, ESCO pre-qualification processes, technical support, to enable federal agencies to procure energy savings and facility improvements through performance contracts. So these projects can include energy efficiency on-site generation, such as CHP, and energy efficiency measures. And FEMP also covers contracts called UESC, that's utility energy savings contracts, which are pretty similar to ESPC. They don't have the exact performance guarantee that an ESPC does, but they do engage in performance assurance, which also utilizes M&V practices. So FEMP's M&V Guidance 4.0 is based on the IPMVP guidance, and it has the 4 M&V options, A, B, C, and D, but FEMP actually adds specifics for applying the framework. FEMP provides more specific procedures for determining M&V approaches, for evaluating M&V plans, and establishing the basis of payment, establishing baselines. So it takes IPMVP and kind of adds more practical application examples and approaches. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab ESCO database project. So over 15 plus years, Lawrence Berkeley Lab and NIESCO, the National Association of Energy Service Companies, have collaborated on a project to collect and develop the largest database of ESCO project data in the world. And right now it has about over 5,600 projects. So it's a repository of project level data that includes project costs, verified savings data, and a list of ECMs, but not ECM level savings data per se. And the objective of this project is really to track ESCO industry market and project performance trends. So we produce a number of different reports. We do a market analysis every 3 years of what's going on in terms of ESCO market trends, who the customers are, what their various practices are. And then we also do analysis of the projects themselves that are submitted to this database. And the projects are submitted voluntarily, many of them through the NIESCO accreditation process. And then we also we produce reports that analyze such things as project cost, trends in the ECM mix, in project savings performance, and cost benefit, investment level, even energy efficiency and distributed generation technology penetration, information about how non-energy benefits are playing into the projects, and more. And we're actually right now embarking on a new study looking at project cost and performance trends. The last one we did was about 5 years ago, and that only had projects through 2008. So this year we're working on a report that includes projects through 2016. Another thing that this database does is it provides some benchmarking statistics on the eProject Builder website, and I'll talk about eProject Builder in a second. So any member of the public can go into eProject Builder and get some general benchmarks, medians and ranges for different kinds of retrofit strategies in this historic database. So I'll now talk about the eProject Builder project. So eProject Builder is an online secure portal, if you will, or tool for entering and tracking ESPC data. And it's funded by 2 different organizations within DOE. One is FEMP, and the other is Office of Weatherization. Both of these agencies had a strong interest in finding ways to standardize the way that ESPC data is collected and reported for a number of different reasons, which I'll talk about in a second. It was launched in late 2014, and we're having increasing users of the system. We also are continuing to add features, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a second. But overall, the project objectives are to standardize the kinds of data collected and reported. And this would be across ESCOs and across market segments such as federal, state, K-12, university, local, etc. And it's why it's so important to standardize this data is, I mean, we can look at the history of ESPC projects, and one of the reasons FEMP was one of the pioneers of starting this project was they had data in so many different formats and forms and locations, and it made it very difficult to analyze what was going on with their project because they couldn't compare like to like. Similarly, the state sector, you know, state and local ESCOs do things their own way, which is, you know, great for them, but it makes it very difficult for states, for example, to compare different proposals where ESCOs are providing different kinds of data. So further, once you have that data and once you have your projects in the performance period, it's very difficult to do rigorous benchmarking or even good solid data-based analysis. So, you know, if you're a state and you've got, you know, $500 million in performance contracting, but every contract is different and the data fields are different, how do you report what your projects are doing, you know, to your governor or your legislature? So the idea here is to develop a national tool that does standardize the basic data set that's collected and reported. And so, you know, it kind of relates to what Steve described before, issues with consistency, rigor, and completeness So we want to help overcome those. And sort of the long run goal is to smooth the transaction costs and help agencies and ESCOs be able to tell their ESPC success stories much more easily and help overcome skepticism about whether ESPC performs, bring transparency, etc. And so another piece of eProject Builder is providing a platform for tracking the M&V results for the life of the project, or as long as M&V is going to be collected or conducted. So let's give you a quick look at here's the sign-in page, and any ESCO or any customer of an ESPC or even a UESC can sign up and start using eProject Builder for their projects. And we do offer regular trainings. And if someone signs up and once they have several projects in place, they will see a pretty cool project summary of their projects. And then once a project is in the system and has been approved and committed to the database, the ESCO can then start adding the M&V data, and there's a whole summary page of a project's M&V data and what the status is. So right now, eProject Builder contains 460 projects that have been added over the last couple of years, and this represents implementation costs of $3.8 billion and cumulative guaranteed savings of $9.4 billion. So it's starting to become a pretty hefty database, but it's still in its infancy. So there are some initiatives happening that are going to increase uptake and also increase the robustness of the data that's in there that can be used for benchmarking in aggregate. Right now, Department of Energy FEMP is going to be requiring ESCOs to use eProject Builder. It's basically the eProject Builder data fields will replace the current task order schedules that FEMP asks the ESCOs to fill out for projects. Also, FEMP and DOE is starting a new DOE qualified ESCO list process, and the ESCOs will be submitting projects in eProject Builder for that. And having it all online will just make the interactions much easier than sort of the mailing CD of spreadsheets of your projects and things like that, of how they do it now. So that'll streamline things, and it will also help build out this database. And then NIESCO will also be using eProject Builder as the platform to collect the projects submitted for NIESCO accreditation. And then in terms of standardizing M&V tracking, a 3-state team, this was a team that received a State Energy Program Competitive Award for improving and making recommendations for M&V practices, evaluated eProject Builder as a part of that process, and they did find eProject Builder suitable for agencies, particularly agencies that want to track a portfolio of projects. And you heard a lot about the National Energy Efficiency Registry, and eProject Builder is a key tool that's being considered as the savings repository for private sector ESPC savings. So that's a quick overview. I was told to take 10 minutes, so hopefully that was within the time frame. And I just wanted to give you a slide with some of the resource links for the things I mentioned: IPMVP, ASHRAE, DOE Uniform Methods Project, although you should probably look at Mike Lee's slides for that one, and the FEMP guidelines, and then if you want to know what kinds of reports LBNL does, there's that, and then the bottom link for eProject Builder.
Okay, well, great, Liz. Thanks so much for doing that. As we're reaching close to the end of our time for the webinar today, I did have hopefully 2 real quick clarifying questions for you, Liz, and then might have a general question for the rest of our panel. Liz, I guess first one, hopefully a simple question is, for using eProject Builder, would only the ESCOs access the information, or would the owners and others have access to their data and analytics from the eProject Builder?
Right, that's a great question, Steve. The owners of I guess, project owner, if you will, or the end-use customer also have access. And that's kind of a key piece of the key transparency piece. And in fact, a couple of ESCOs have said they really like that eProject Builder gives the owners more, or the customers more ownership of their own data. And further, third parties, when authorized by the ESCO or the customer, can also access the data. So for example, we've got the Veterans Administration, and they've got a lot of projects in there, and the head of the VA ESPC program has what we call project viewer status. So she can view the projects and output reports and data for those projects and see what's going on there as well.
Okay.
And I'll just add, sorry, just a thing about security is that by default, any single project in eProject Builder is only accessible by the ESCO and the single customer account that initiated this project together as a team. They can then choose to add these third-party project viewers if they want, but no one else other than the LBNL admin team can access the projects this way. And so once we have enough projects in eProject Builder, we will be able to provide a dynamic benchmarking tool, and that will produce statistics that in aggregate. So again, people won't have access to a single project, but they'll be able to look at what's the median and the range of a lighting retrofit's cost per square foot and savings per square foot and things like that.
Okay. And Liz, one other again, maybe just if you can maybe just quickly list, are there other non-energy benefits? You mentioned those non-energy impacts that are in eProject Builder or the LBL ESCO database, such as water savings and others?
Yeah. That's a good question. In eProject Builder, we do ask people to choose a technology category, and most of the technology categories or ECM categories are energy related. There are water related and O&M savings, and then we do have an other category. So if you're a K-12 school that's doing, say, a new roof or something, that would have to go under other. But there will be other spaces for that data to be filled in. In the historic ESCO database, which will soon kind of morph into the eProject Builder once we get the NIESCO accreditation feature going, there are details about non-energy benefits as well. And in the LBNL reports, we do include information about non-energy benefits in those reports. And we'll talk about that in the upcoming report that we're working on right now.
Well, great. Well, with that, I think as we conclude the last few minutes here, I think Peter, you and Liz both gave us some examples of how the common reporting and protocols are being applied in industry and in government, like with the Veterans Administration, as you mentioned, Liz. Wanted to give an opportunity to Mike Lee from DOE or Rodney from NASIO, Molly in Tennessee, if you have some examples of how you see these consistent protocols and reportings being applied and useful, and if you have any lessons learned that you want to add for in a minute or so for our audience here.
This is Mike. I don't know that this is going to be specific enough for what you were asking for, but I do think that one of the big questions that comes up as we interact with different states and their public utility commissions is questions about why evaluators use different methods for the same program, and it just creates a lot of questions about are the savings different because the methods that were used were different, and how would the savings compare if the methods were the same? And so I think there is value, especially as we communicate what we're doing in the energy efficiency world with people who are not sort of experts in evaluation, and I think sometimes more straightforward approaches that are more common in other industries or other areas make a little bit more sense off the bat than trying to explain sort of the nuances of how we do EM&V. And so, so I think that is one of the benefits of it that I see as we sort of talk to different state people out there.
Okay. Thanks. Molly or Rod, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I guess I'll add a couple of words and a little bit of background on NEAR. The project was conceived when the Clean Power Plan was impending, and of course many things have changed since then. But the Clean Power Plan had envisioned the opportunity for the potential for interstate trading of what were going to be called emission rate credits, and there was very strong interest that an ERC, a megawatt hour saved in Nevada, be the same as one saved in Michigan or Florida or elsewhere. So I think that was one impetus for the project. I think given the Clean Power Plan is likely not to occur, there is still value in being able to provide some sort of platform that would allow some sort of apples to apples and oranges to oranges trading. I don't know that we're there. Again, the NEAR is predicated on each program defining how it does things and what its criteria are. NEAR will not impose M&V requirements or say you must use net or you must use gross. But I think it provides a platform that would allow like to trade with like. The air regulators regulating NOx may not care about free riders and things like that. It's not a utility, program, but they do care about air quality and a way to have some sort of consistent means of having the megawatt hour saved or therm saved, and then afterwards translating into the avoided emissions would be a useful thing. I also want to add, sort of amplify what Liz said about e-project builder feeding into NEAR. That would be a very useful thing that would, I think, facilitate energy service performance contracts playing a more visible role in energy efficiency policy, and maybe lower some of the barriers between ratepayer and non-ratepayer program recognition.
Thanks. Thank you, Molly. Any concluding comments?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all our presenters, Mike, Molly, Rodney, Peter, and Liz for presentations today. As you can see on the slide, more information is available on the web, and we'll have further webinars. And I want to wish you all a good day. I want to put up, though, a concluding slide here for our colleague and mentor, our friend, Art Rosenfeld, who passed last Friday. Many of us knew him and worked with him and enjoyed what he brought so much to this world. Art passed away last Friday, and just wanted to mention that and call that out to you all. So thank you for joining us today, and take care, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, Steve.